Hey, I'm James from Smoky Dad Barbecue, and today I am doing my first ever cook on a reverse flow offset smoker. This happens to be the Echo Reverse Flow from Smoke North, and if you missed my unboxing video, there's a couple advantages on paper that I'm looking to draw out in a series of tests and find out the pros and the cons of a reverse flow offset smoker versus something like my Huron Gen 2 direct flow offset situated behind me. And I think the perfect cook to break in any new offset, and you let me know a whole bunch of great ideas in the comments, including things like brisket and ribs, but some St. Louis side cut ribs rose to the top of the list. So that's exactly what we're gonna do for today. But before I jump into the recipe, if you missed the unboxing video, what are some of these benefits that I'm looking to validate or perhaps myth bust through a series of tests? And so the first advantage I was able to validate in my unboxing video, which is proving the consistency of the temperature from one side of the grill to the other side. This grill was incredibly stable, left to right in the middle on both the lower as well as the upper racks. And I think this gives us a great platform for getting consistent results no matter where we place our food inside of our offset smoker. The second potential benefit is perhaps additional sources of heat. Now, all grills, you've heard me say this many times before, but we use the same three sources of heat. We have conductive heat, which I run into all the time on something like my Kamado style grills or my pizza oven, where you've got food sitting directly on a hot surface and that transfers lots of energy. We have radiant energy, where we put energy and it's stored into whatever we're cooking. My pizza oven, for example, has 5 inches of insulation, or Kamados or ceramic. They retain a lot of heat and they help radiate some of that stored energy into our food, and that accelerates the cooking process. And last but not least, and maybe the signature of any offset, is the convection airflow. I did a measurement using an aeronometer. I was able to see 20 times more air movement coming out of the smokestack on my Huron Gen 2 versus what I was getting out of something like an energy efficient Kamado. So this is definitely a staple of any offset cooker. But what I'm interested in seeing is, does this play out in terms of easier cook times, more consistent temperatures, the interval of adding splits? So these are all questions that will start to gain some insight in today's cook as well as future cooks. But enough about that, let's get our ribs ready and we'll build our fire for our first break-in cook on the Echo Reverse Flow by Smoke North. So this might be really short and sweet, as this St. Louis cut of ribs from Costco looks amazing in the package. Part of the reason why I picked them. So I'm not sure we're gonna have any trim work to do. So I've just got some paper towels so we can pat them dry, along with my updated Texas rub. This is one that I've made based off of the favorite things from the Franklin's barbecue rub, Goldie's, as well as Black's. And this is my interpretation, taking some of the favorite things from each rub and my own concoction. So if you haven't seen that, I'll put a chapter at the end of the video, but I don't want to take your time if you've already seen that several times. So let's get these out of the package and pat them dry. So if we want to be picky, there is a little bit here for me to do. And since I have a knife out already, I might as well just take this scraggly stuff off at the very end, as that will just burn up. But for once here, Costco's done a really nice job. I don't have a ton of work to do. So I'm just gonna clean up the bottom here. Looks good. So you'll notice I'm not going to add any binder, since these are going to go in the refrigerator overnight. That's going to serve as our overnight dry brine, but the salt that's in the rub is going to help pull out some moisture, and that moisture is going to be what helps the rest of our rub adhere. So the binder is not needed. So take you fast forward while we season both sides. It's going to start on the bottom and then we'll finish on our presentation side. The only thing I'll do is halfway through stop, give the rub another shake. As you can see here, some of those red pepper flakes and larger granulated chunks of garlic, I don't want them all to be settling to the bottom and not get an equal amount on all parts of our ribs. Well, I think for me tonight's going to be a lot like Christmas Eve when you're a kid, because I can't wait for tomorrow. See you then. I always like to start with some kiln-dried grocery store. This is birch wood, as it will come up to temperature. It's almost like paper, not a lot of humidity, but it'll light really quick and easy, and we don't have to wait too long to get a great coal bed. So let's grab our Grill Blazer grill gun, fire this up. All right, that looks good. Let's give this a couple minutes to help heat soak our pit and get some heat into our stack so that we're and then get some heat into our smokestack so that we are drawing properly. See you in a couple of minutes. So I've just built the Derby fire configuration that I have been loving in my Huron, as this gives me, like clockwork, 1 hour of fire at 270 degrees. So it's 2 logs on the bottom that have been preheated, and then these 3 logs are quite tight together, which is helping knock down the fire. I mean, I've got the door open right now, but you can see sort of the air pulling it fairly aggressively towards our cook chamber, so there's some great draw going on. Let me close the door. All right, let's get our ribs on. This is what they look like after the overnight dry brine. They've tacked up really nice. Our rub is completely adhered. And I already know from my first video where I did some data logging that I get incredibly even temperatures left to right as well as top and bottom. I've taken the top rack out just to make it easier if we decide to do a mop or something like that a little bit later on. But let's drop in our 2 racks of ribs. Lots of real estate to work with today, nice in the middle. Let's close that up, get those smoking. I'll see you in a little bit when we've got an update to spray. All right, let's take a look at our ribs. I've been spraying oh my goodness, those look good. So I've been spraying on the hour mark with 50-50 apple cider and water mixture. I saw a video where Chuds mentioned his reverse flow that he built. The ribs were done in 2 hours. That had me really nervous. I checked in 2 hours and we were nowhere close to done, but we are exactly at 4 hours. So let's get a temperature here. 190. 201, 203. These are done. These are done in 4 hours. Oh my gosh. If anything, I might have overshot my mark. Let me grab some tongs. Moment of truth. We'll see if these are overdone or going to hold together. You know what? Might be okay. They're not breaking just yet. I think we're just in the nick of time. Get those off. Again, I think we're okay. Let's let these rest a few minutes. Great looking pullback on those bones. Again, this is only 4 hours. This is about the spot where I'd get the butcher paper out and think about doing a wrap to help accelerate things and get them across the line, but we're done. Let's let these rest for a minute and we'll slice into them. Well, wow, these certainly look amazing. To find out if they taste as amazing, there's only one thing we can do and dive in for our taste test. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I was thinking about maybe doing a bit of a mop sauce and or just sauce in general. I didn't update you, but I decided against both of those options since I'm really curious on the reverse flow offset if I can appreciate any smoke difference. Now, the best way to do this is a side-by-side comparison, so I'll definitely add that to the future. Today, I'm just too excited to try my first cook ever on a reverse flow offset smoker, and as I can already tell, there's a learning in the books in terms of the speed at which this gets the job done versus what I become accustomed to. So I left out all those other things that might just make it a little bit trickier to appreciate any smoke nuance, as well as one of the benefits is the fat rendering and hitting our deflector plate, and as those fats caramelize and burn, similar to what you get if I was doing direct cooking inside of my Kamado, where you get that smoke infused back up into our food. I wanted to give myself the best chance at appreciating any difference, which is why I skipped all those things. So we've been resting now for about 10-15 minutes on the counter. I can't wait any longer. Let's get nice and close and dive in for our taste test. While we're nice and close, I haven't had a peek yet at the bottom, but I'm curious at the level of doneness that we are getting on the bottom of our ribs. So we'll flip these over, take a look. You know what, I'm happy with that. That looks good. I was actually expecting, perhaps based on them being so far done, to see a little bit more charring, but there's nothing that I can't live with there. Those look really good. Get out my Dow Strong slicer. I can follow along, try and make sure I run with the bones. That looks really good. Nice rendered fat. Good looking smoke ring. All right, we've got some meat Jenga. Let's dive in and see how they are. Cheers. Well, I was worried, but that is still bite through. Don't have to wrestle with it, but also not fall off the bone. Rub is fantastic. That was so amazing. I got carried away and ate the whole bone and forgot to be paying attention for the smoke as I was swept off my feet by the rub. But now let's try and focus in and pay attention to some of the smoke differences that we might be able to pick up, along with any of those smokes that might be infused from our baffle plate directly under the ribs. It's really just an excuse to eat a second one of these. They're so good. Cheers. These are fantastic. Right on the money. I don't know if you can see that, but able to bite through. This is really good. So, wow, thoughts? These are fantastic. And there's so many things that you can do. I recently did some bacon injected ribs, and they're one of my all-time favorite recipes. If you haven't seen that, you want to check that out. But that adds a little bit of extra tallow. But those are on some baby backs versus these St. Louis ribs. And they don't necessarily need so much of a helping hand with that intermuscular fat. The rub and this cook is amazing. It is tricky from memory, I always mention this, to compare smoke profile from a cook a week or two ago or a month ago, depending on your cadence of cooking some of these things, maybe even a year ago, without doing it side by side. So I'll defer judgment on the smoke until I do a side by side. But what I can pick up without the side by side comparison, first of all, this is incredibly clean. I have a lot of people reach out and say, James, I'm worried if I have something like a Kamado or a kettle or anything else like that, that if I go to an offset, it's going to be too smoky and my family won't like it. And this is just a reminder again, smoke done really well is not necessarily more smoky, it's how it penetrates all the way through the meat. Think of this analogy where if you were to season a steak and you were to put your salt on it directly before grilling, and then you were to bite into it, you might get a nice hit of salt right on the crust and then nothing down inside. That is what so many other smokers tend to do with smoke, is they sprinkle a little bit of that on the outside for flavor, but it doesn't get all the way down into the meat. In contrast to that, if we do an overnight dry brine with salt, it's not necessarily more salty, but you get the benefit of that salt working its way all the way down deep inside the meat. And this is what offsets do so incredibly well with the smoke, is that they help penetrate all the way down to the bone. There was nothing on this bite where I wasn't getting amazing, sweet, savory taste of nice, clean smoke all the way through. So again, if you're on the fence, I have people in my family who have an aversion to things that are too strongly smoked, and some of their favorite meals come off the offsets. So don't necessarily put it in the category of more smoke, but think about better smoke that penetrates all the way through. And these have that in spades. In terms of tasting any grilled flavor, well, I'm normally grilling directly over charcoal. I've done live fire beef ribs, chicken, steaks, you name it. So I'm not picking up a charcoal grilled flavor. So at this point, I can't say I necessarily am gaining any taste different from the baffle plate, other than to say the smoke, what I can tell is clean, pretty doggone awesome if I'm honest. And to find out how it compares to a direct flow offset, make sure you've got the notification bell turned on and you're subscribed to be alerted when that video comes out. As I mentioned earlier, I'll put a chapter at the end of the end credits here on how I made this rub. If you haven't seen that, it's absolutely worth checking it out because it is so good. This is a combination of my favorite things from the Goldies, the Franklins, as well as the Blacks rubs with a couple of my own modifications, and it is turning out amazing on everything that I've put it on so far. So that is after the end credits. But that's it for today. I'm James from Smoking Dad Barbecue signing off. Remember, don't be afraid to fire it up. Ooh yeah. Cheers. All right, there is a lot going on in front here, but don't worry, we're not going to use everything. So if you saw my Texas Rub Showdown, I put 3 of the most popular Texas barbecue joints head to head, starting with Blacks, Goldies, as well as Franklins. And in the taste test, even though Blacks won, there was a little bit of each of these rubs that we really liked. I liked some of the more salt forward flavors that you get on Blacks, along with what you can see in there, some of the red chili flakes. With the Goldies, a little bit stronger, on the pepper, as well as a bit of a Lowry's flavor coming in. And the Franklin's is a 2-part with salt and pepper on its own, as well as this barbecue rub, which if you were to recreate this, it has a little bit more of a citric acid flavor, which is what I'm going to get inside the Lowry's. I'll put the make your own Lowry's rub down below, but it has some very similar ingredients, and in terms of the taste test, many people actually thought this was my homemade rub. So that's what we're going to make up today. I'll put those aside and go for my version, but if you're using any of those 3, you're off to a great start. So since we're only doing about 4 racks, I think I'm going to start with a couple capfuls of fresh cracked pepper. That should be enough to get us through these 4 racks. So let's try our hand here with 2 capfuls of fresh cracked black pepper. I'm using a 5 peppercorn melody. You can see a little bit of white, red, black pepper. I'm not sure what the other 2 are. It's from Costco, so that's just giving me a couple different spices. You don't need to follow along with a pepper can. I just happen to make my own rubs all the time, and you'd be blown away the difference that fresh spices make in your rubs. And since I get about 10 times more pepper per crack, it doesn't take that long. I got a little bit more to go, but we've almost got a full cap right now. So I'll take you fast forward while I get 2 full caps of fresh cracked black pepper. There's number 2. And just looking at the quantity, I know I said 2, but I think I'm going to go for 3. It'll also make our ratios easier with the salt, since I'm going to do 2/3 Diamond Crystal Kosher salt and 1/3 Lowry's. That'll just be a cap of each to get 50-50 salt and pepper. So I'll take you fast forward while I do 1 last cap full of pepper. All right, that looks good. So we now have our pepper. So we're going to start with 50-50 salt and pepper, as I mentioned. So let's get out some Diamond Crystal Kosher salt. And I'm going to do 2 capfuls of this. Add that in. And to get to our 50-50 ratio, I will do 1 capful of Lowry's. And again, if you don't have Lowry's in your area, I'll put how to make your own down in the description. Okay, so we're now a 50-50 salt and pepper rub ratio. I'm going to add just a couple extra ingredients. I guess I'll save my pepper cannon cap here for measurement, but I'm going to go sort of 2/3 garlic and the rest onion powder. Give us a little bit of a savory flavor profile. Will go great with ribs. Next, I'm going to add just a little bit of color, so I'm going to go for about a 1/2 cap of smoked paprika, and then about a 1/4 cup of cayenne. Might as well add the rest of that since we're almost out. A dash of mustard powder. We're going to be using mustard as our binder, so I don't need to add that much, just enough to cover the top of our paprika and cayenne. And last little bit of space here, I'll sneak in a couple red pepper flakes that'll mix throughout our rub once we give this a good shake. You want to leave about 1 inch to 1.5 inches at least at the top. Make sure we have enough space for getting everything to mix together. There's all our layers. Let's mix them up. Okay, that's looking good. I might just add in a few more red pepper flakes. Looks like I can get away with a little bit more for that texture, but otherwise I'm really happy with the consistency of our rub. So like I mentioned at the beginning, this is a mixture of all 3. You can see a couple again of those red pepper flakes along with a lot more salt in the blacks rub. So we've got for a bit of a blend, taking the pepper flakes from blacks. We've got a little bit more of that color from the Franklins and getting some of that citric acid or acidity in our rub flavor that everyone really liked in this one. And then I've gone for a coarser, I don't have much left of the Goldies, but a coarser grain pepper than something that you might get just out of the bag. So we get a little bit more of that texture, and people really liked the texture of the Goldies rub. So now we've got our rub ready. Let's get our ribs out of the pack and start to trim them up and get our rub on.